we move along on today's agenda, 5.2, Powell River Transit Analysis and Recommendations. Sustainability Planner, Ms. Lukanogava.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today we are excited to present to you the review of the Zanga Bus pilot and recommendations for the future of the Zanga Bus, but also of our public transit system as a whole. To recap, back in February of 2020, Council adopted the Powell River Transit Vision and Goals document, which outlined the vision for efficient, convenient, reliable, accessible, and affordable public transit system that's well used by the community and contributes to sustainable, vibrant, and equitable quality of life in Powell River. And one of the actions in this document was to explore on-demand transit. With support from the federal Built in Canada Innovation Program, we launched the Zanga Bus on-demand pilot in February of 2021. And this pilot allowed us to collect valuable data and community feedback on the service. And you'll see in the report appendices there are over 20 interviews with Zanga Bus riders, as well as letters from community organizations that we received over the course of the pilot. As we were analyzing the Zanga Bus pilot, we really realized that we couldn't just look at Zanga Bus in isolation. It really worked as part of our public transit system, so we had to look at the system as a whole and how on-demand can be part of it and how it can benefit our public transit services. So to help us take that more holistic look at Zanga Bus, we worked with David Cooper of Leading Mobility and Erin Toop of WSP Consulting, and David is here with us today in person, and Erin is joining us online. And I'll just give a brief introduction here. So Erin Toop is a professional transportation engineer with 14 years experience managing multimodal transportation planning, policy, and strategy projects. She's recently led transit reviews and feasibility studies for several small communities, including Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, Cranbrook, Selma, BC. She also played a key role in Calgary Transit's fleet electrification program and in planning for Regional Transit Commission in Edmonton. Prior to WSP, Erin worked in Edmonton, where she was responsible for major planning and strategy projects, including LRT, network implementation, and city's work on new mobility. Erin is an active member of the Institute of Transportation Engineers Steering Committee for Mobility as a Service and Mobility on Demand. And she also currently sits on the Transportation Research Board Committee on Transportation Planning Policy and Processes. So welcome, Erin. And David Cooper has worked on numerous transformative transportation initiatives across Canada since 2005. He's the principal and founder of Leading Mobility Consulting. He's worked on complex and innovative transit projects across Canada, ranging from transit feasibility studies for communities that are just exploring public transit to development of rapid transit projects in Canada's largest cities. And David recently authored the Canadian Urban Transit Association's COVID-19 National Recovery Strategy and co-authored Canada's first national transit study on how women travel on public transit. And currently David is completing the first national guidelines for Canada on on-demand transit. So a lot of expertise there with on-demand specifically. And David's work has been nationally recognized. He's the recipient of President's Award for Young Planner of the Year by Canadian Institute of Planners, Individual Leadership Award from the Canadian Urban Transit Association, and Mass Transit's Top 40 Under 40 in North America. So welcome, David. But before I hand it off to David and Erin for their presentation, I want to ask Noriko Kubota, our social planner who's on the line, to comment on how she sees this work that we're doing on transit fitting in with her social planning work. Can I pass it on to you, Noriko?
Yes, thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here as your regional social planner to highlight the importance of transportation and mobility access to our residents under the social planning program. I am also going to very quickly ensure the interconnections are highlighted for you between transportation and our recently completed poverty reduction strategy. As mentioned in the report itself, transportation is a means to accessing services and amenities such as grocery shopping, health appointments, employment, socialization, and infrastructure, including our rec complex, the library, parks, and hopefully again very soon, community events. But what the list of services does not describe is, I believe, a really important metaphor related to transit, and that is time is money. This is also actually known as time poverty. When somebody has access to resources, they can save time with various things, such as access to a washing machine in their own home, rather than having to travel to a laundromat, or things such as paying for a cleaner or babysitter. These are just some examples of how we can save time. And there is often a stereotype about people with low income, which is that they have nothing but time. And the reality is that it's exactly the opposite. People with lower income who actually have extreme time pressure, because money and time are linked resources. The more time you spend having to get to a doctor's appointment means less time or ability to pick up a shift of work. Time can be one of our most valuable resources. Because I've mentioned the connection between low income and transportation, I want to remind you of the 3 highlighted areas from our poverty reduction strategy for our region. And that includes our very large demographic of seniors. They are also low income comparatively to our average in BC. Then the second is also our lone parents demographic. And 60% of lone parents have children who are living in poverty. And finally, but not in chronological order, is our working poor. So we note that 40% of BC's low-income residents are actually working and employed. Additionally, I want to highlight that, of course, when we're talking about transportation, we cannot forget about our children and youth who don't yet have access to personalized transportation unless it's provided to them. And I think overall, some of the demographic information I highlight for you and remind you about from our poverty report are noted actually in the feedback gathered by Anna in this report. And the feedback was gathered through conducting phone interviews and reviewing comments and reviews on the Zunga app. The feedback is profound and touching, and just as you heard a few months ago from the Youth Community Action Team members, these individuals highlight how having access to an on-demand transportation service has positively impacted their lives. I really want to congratulate this mayor and council for supporting the pilot initiative, especially as it was implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also seen as somewhat entrepreneurial. Since then, as Anna's noted in our report, we as a city have been highlighted by the BC Alliance for Healthy Living, and we've received inquiries to learn from us on our on-demand system from cities in Canada, the United States, and as far as Australia. So thank you. And my last comment to share with you as social planner is this, that through social planning lens, our residents require access to affordable and effective transportation for greater equity and the opportunity to thrive, and for the greatest use of our infrastructure as a city and the greatest opportunities to connect with one another. So thank you, and I will hand it back to Anna.
Thanks so much for this, Mariko. And with this, I would like to hand it off to David for his presentation.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Mariko, for the opening remarks, and thank you, Chair Palm and Mayor Formosa for having me today. As mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague Aaron Toop, who will be online, and we'll be facilitating a conversation and questions after this presentation. So today I'm here to walk through the findings of our transit study here in Powell River, and there's 4 components that we looked at in this study. The first one was we looked at overview of existing conditions that you're having on your transit system as well as in your community. We assessed the existing fixed route transit service within the city of Powell River. So this is Route 1 to Wildwood, this is Route 2 to Grieve Point, Route 3 to Upper Westview. It was very centric on the city of Powell River. We did not look at the rural transit service, that was not in our scope. We did analysis of the Zunga on-demand transit service in terms of recommended next steps for the overall program, as well as we're looked at updating the city's short and long-term transit directions. So some of our observations from our assessment, where we spoke to city staff, we looked at the data, and we also went on your system, is there's a few of our findings that we've seen, and some of them are actually pretty common with other communities similar in size to the city of Powell River across Canada. The system right now is a bit unintuitive in terms of fixed route transit service design. A lot of routes are very circuitous. They try to cover as much ground as they can, which really does have time penalties for customers. It has sometimes very uneven frequencies. We have service for 1 hour, they'll run every 20 minutes, and then it'll go to every 60 minutes. Then we'll have service that goes every 30 minutes to 45 minutes to 60 minutes to up to 80 minutes. Sometimes trips are connected with other routes, and it's just not intuitive to the customer, the types of transfers and services that are possible, and which really drives up time. And just to really speak to Mariko's point earlier is that time is an asset to everyone, and when we have services that are trying to do everything but really challenging to do that with the travel time, it really penalizes the people who rely on the service the most, which really makes them time poor. There's certain bespoke trips that you have in your service to go to certain parts of the communities, particularly from Brooks Secondary to school trips up in Cranberry. And then there's a lot of focus on school services. There's a very distinct peak period that you have with your school services, but we also have services that have a lot of users for essential work purposes and things like that. Transit service hours have been rather steady in your community for over the past 5 years. It's been about 11,000 annual hours. Your ridership pre-pandemic was about 18 passengers per hour and then dropped to about 11 just because you had the restrictions coming in. And also we saw a downfall of transit ridership and revenue last year. So you had about 54% of your riders last year, which is actually pretty consistent for where you stand for across the country. So that's a good piece of news there. You do have a very unique operating model within the BC Transit Municipal Systems Program because you have your in-house operations ability for your services. So it also has given you the flexibility and the autonomy to make greater decisions of how you provide transit service. And we saw that with the launch of the on-demand service. You're the first on-demand service in BC. And I just want to underscore that with one thing. I work across the country in communities is the size of Powell River, but communities also out in Toronto. And it was very noticeable that Powell River moved forward on this as the first community in BC to do this, but also Powell River leveraged federal money to do this particular program, and that's something that was actually seen very positively amongst my colleagues in the industry and noticed across the country. One reason why I'm also working on this project is just the interest of your pioneering spirit on that. Transit travel times need to compete with other modes. 70% of your trips in the community are under 15 minutes in duration, and why that's important is that if you're competing against car trips that take every 15 minutes, it actually makes it very challenging to make transit competitive in some aspects, and sometimes there is opportunities for improvement on that as well. Mariko did talk about some of these considerations, but there's a housing crisis that we're seeing across the country. I am a land use planner by trade. I also do a little bit of work in housing as well. And the second largest cost in your household is transportation. Sometimes it's up to 20 to 25% of your costs, depending on the types of trips you take and the types of services you make, and there's significant savings in your family household budget if you take public transit. If it's available, convenient, and reliable for you to use, and that's something we'll talk about through this presentation. Lack of affordable housing transportation options were cited as a barrier to accessing education and essential services. That's a common theme through work that we've had in small communities across Canada that's not isolated to Powell River. And then the Ending Poverty Strategy lists on-demand transit as one of Powell River's assets to support resident well-being, but this was also identified as positive by survey respondents. So back in 2020, Council did approve the Powell River Transit System vision and goals, and the next few slides are just going to walk through the work that we've done with city staff to take your goals and to realize them in your future state for your transit service. So, and how we're going to get there together as part of this plan. So the first one is growing ridership. How do we get there? We're going to invest in transit service that increase access for all residents. In the future, you'll have frequency improvements during multiple time periods through key destinations throughout Powell River. The second goal being directing and connecting community centers. We'll be looking to realign bus routes and enhance connectivity to reduce travel time in the community, and then have a new high-frequency crosstown service that directly connects key destinations in your community. The third goal is being efficient and cost-effective. We are seeing duplication on your services. There's an overlap between Route 3 Upper Westview and your Zunga on-demand transit service. So in the future state, we'll be looking to replacing the Route 3 Upper Westview with an enhanced on-demand service so the residents of Upper Westview maintain that level of transit service throughout the day and also have it enhanced upon. The fourth goal, working efficiently with other transportation options. We want to improve the legibility and convenience of your transit system to make it attractive to more residents who live in your community and who will be moving to your community here in Powell River. And that would be through express transit service with consistent routing, frequencies, and level of service to provide that predictability, legibility for customers to access public transit. The sixth goal is being technologically innovative and customer responsive. You're able to now harness a lot of data through your on-demand app in terms of customer satisfaction surveys, in terms of destination data, but then also BC Transit will be implementing the Next Ride program, the automatic vehicle location system on your transit buses. So we'll be able to get stop-level data throughout your system rather soon, actually, which is great. And this could help drive an engagement process driven by data, really having the strengths of that data to help you make decisions. So we have a series of recommendations I'll be walking through later in this presentation, but with the caveat that there needs to be a community consultation that we'd be recommending as part of that as well. And then the last goal is connecting regional communities. We want to maintain the existing regional transit connections that you have and allow for flexibility for those connections to feed into a crosstown high-frequency service. Before I dive into the specifics of the performance of the system, I think it's important to walk through the partnership roles or responsibilities that you have between the City of Powell River and BC Transit. So the City of Powell River sets the routes and service levels as one of the funders. You approve your local funding. Match for the transit services, and for conventional, that's 53%, and then for paratransit, your handy-dart service is about 33%. You establish fares and receive transit revenue to offset your operating costs. You provide maintenance and operations of your transit fleet. You provide on-street supervision and incident management for anything that occurs on the road, as well as you implement and maintain bus stop facilities throughout your community. BC Transit is responsible for the capital operating capital funding support. It provides detailed transit planning and scheduling, so the ones who do roster out your trips and your runs for your types of services. BC Transit confirms the conventional transit service and custom service hours, procures your transit fleet, does your capital planning and marketing services, and then this is all tied together as part of your annual operating agreement, which specifies your service specifications, your budget, and your fares. Just want to walk through a little bit of the transit service delivery models that you have right now here in Powell River and some of the advantages and disadvantages and really benefits and limitations of them. So for fixed route transit services, typically they're used for connecting major trip generators. So this could be, places of employment, commercial areas, schools, hospitals, community service facilities, as well as longer distance trips across your community. They tend to provide more passenger capacity. Schedules are consistent, they're on a set timetable. And then, but the one drawback is buses will run no matter how many people are on board the bus. And then typically they're not great for coverage services. And then for on-demand services, they're more suited for trip patterns that are a little bit less obvious, more specific to the trip of the customer that's taking the trip. They replace typically underperforming fixed routes and supplemented fixed routes low demand times. We've seen this. There's been a huge proliferation of on-demand transit across Canada, especially in the 2 years. There's been at least 24 deployments just for those types of services across Canada. Provides operational flexibility. Wait times and travel times are typically better than conventional services depending on how the parameters of the services that you have. The size of the coverage area is limited. Typically there are little zones that feed into a conventional transit service, and then they're not suitable for high demand situations. That really, there's times where if you're carrying too many people, it really erodes your ability to pick up trips. It really erodes your ability to have a reasonable wait time. And then there's also concerns about technology accessibility. Most trips are booked on phones, and some systems have done things as kiosks or pickup phones or call centers to facilitate those trips. I'm just going to walk you through some of the system performance data. So this figure here depicts your typical average weekday ridership on the system. So the line in blue is Route 1 that goes to Wildwood to the Town Centre Mall. The line in red is Route 2 that goes from Grief Point to Town Centre, and then Route 3 is Upper Westview. And we typically use 8 riders per hour to really as the threshold. Between anything above that is a little bit more suited for a fixed route scheduled service, and anything below that is more suited for on-demand service. And what's interesting here, especially looking with the 2019 data, which is which we included as appendice to the council package, is that Route 1 through the day is hovering quite well in the fixed route territory, just because you have a lot of key destinations along that particular route as you have now. Route 2 is doing pretty decent and hovering above that threshold through the day. Route 3 is declining through the day. And there's a couple of reasons. One is did not have high ridership before the pandemic, and then 2, it actually duplicates this entire route with Zunga. And we're thinking that when you have the pandemic and also Zunga really eating away from that ridership, it really has eroded its ability for that service to be effective for your community. This is just a couple of maps depicting where these routes go and how they meet that ridership standard. So anything that's bolded in the colors here are routes from the start of service 6 p.m. The 1 and 2 do quite well. There's a shaded area on the bottom half of the map. That's the on-demand area. That's where your Zunga service runs from about 11 to 6:30 every day. And then you'll see Route 3 in that thin green line on the mid part up in Upper Westview. And then for 6 p.m. to the end of service, Route 1 still performing in that fixed route threshold. And then on Saturdays, same story just for Route 1 from the start of service to 6 p.m. And then the whole community could likely be served with an on-demand service after 6 p.m. on Saturdays. This is your average rides per hour for your Zunga bus service in 2021. So you're seeing roughly between 3 to 6 passengers per revenue hour. There's one externality or anomaly to that is from 2 to 3, you have an operator break for 30 minutes, so hence why there's a reduction in that point. So in terms of the creation of some of these recommendations for the service plan we're going to be presenting as part of the next part of this presentation is we looked at 5 key components which really bridge back to those goals we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. Is 1, we're looking to improve the transit experience for customers. We're looking to remove that duplication of service, to simplify and streamline the transit experience to make it a little bit more legible for residents to use, maximizing the benefit of on-demand services, as well as aligning your resources for future enhancements. There's a series of actions we're recommending for the next 6 months. The first one being keeping one Zunga bus in operation with the same service hours, but undertaking the following 3 steps. The first one is accessing and utilizing the stop level data that you'll be getting from BC Transit's Next Wide program to understand the types of boardings and lightings you're seeing throughout the day on the routes, and then seeing what kind of adjustments can be made. Some stops could be removed, some stops could be moved, some routes could be partially realigned. You can get that data to really understand how that service is being utilized, identifying those underutilized stops for future adjustments, and then expand engage the public on the consolidation of Route 3 Upper Westview into expanded Zunga bus service to see how the public and users would feel about that type of transition. You still would have a transit service, it just would be a different type of service delivery model for that type of service. In terms of medium-term planning actions, we did not put a timeline on this. This is something that could be happening over time incrementally, is first monitoring BC Transit's progress on their provincial digital on-demand transit framework. BC Transit is looking into this as a service delivery model. We have not received a timeline from them. Aaron and I have actually worked with another community in Cranbrook that was part of this particular process, and we're still waiting for the results of that framework that they're looking to do this particular service. They did look at Kelowna and Cranbrook as case studies, but as I mentioned, we don't have a timeline from them on this. And then also there hasn't been a determination from BC Transit on how they would fund a paratransit type service, or a Zunga on-demand service that has a lot of characteristics of paratransit. So typically paratransit services are funded 67% by BC Transit, but your conventional services are funded 47%. So in terms of our estimation of costs that we'll have in the next couple of slides, we put a range in because that determination has not been made by BC Transit just yet. The second is we recommend lobbying BC Transit to retain the local branding of the Zunga bus and future service agreements. You have a very unique brand. You have a brand that's been celebrated by your community. You've had representations and presentations here to your council about this, and we think if you want to build upon that success of that program, you're going to want to retain the brand. The third is continuing to coordinate with the Tla'amin community and the regional district to define responsibilities and governance pertaining to service provision. The city does provide BC Transit does provide some specific trips to Tla'amin, and how is that sort itself out in terms of kind of funding and the rolling out of additional service in the future. This is just a summary slide that if you're looking at, we have a number of service projects for the Zunga service that we're looking at. And I'm just going to point at the annual service hours, which is the second column from the left. In terms of the full build out of this plan for Zunga, you'd need 6,250 hours. We'd be reducing service by eliminating, or not repurposing service from Route 3, which would be 2,100 hours, and the net new hours for on-demand is 4,150. I do want to caveat that there's a very big difference between on-demand service hours. It's $65 an hour versus conventional. The Route 3 hours are $110 an hour. That's why there's a very big difference in the costing on this. So if you take the additional hours of having a second Zunga bus during high demand periods and matching the Route 3 time period and repurposing those hours, and then you factor in the revenue, you're looking at additional costs to the city of about $31,000 to even possibly a cost neutral. In terms of a medium-term action for fixed route, we're recommending the implementation of a frequent transit route, which is combining routes 1 and 2, which will serve key destinations, have a consistent headway, service, legibility, and customer experience. This route would be one continuous route through the community, really hitting all those major destinations from the hospital, the Marine Avenue commercial area, town site, Plaza, Vancouver Island University. It would be a 30-minute base frequency, which is very consistent with communities of Powell River size across the country. It would be service from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then 9 to 6 on weekends with a 45-minute frequency on weekday evenings. In terms of the financial impact, you have 8,700 hours already for routes 1 and 2. The combination of these services would be about 15,410, so you require 6,700 new hours. And this could be built in over time. It could be incremental. You could do middays on weekdays. You could do evenings over time. So it would be a net cost of $231,000, but it's not all in one time. You can do that incrementally at time as if council sees fit, and implementation as council sees fits. With that, city staff and myself and Aaron are happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that thorough presentation. It really brings it to light on where we are in this situation. Comments, questions? Councillor Elliott, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. The single combined high-frequency route would use how many buses compared to what we use now?
It'd be 3 in-service buses based on a 30-minute frequency. So you have about 5 buses, so you have enough fleet to do that. It's just repurposing the hours to do it.
Okay, so Route 1 currently has a bus that runs the whole route, and then it runs only one at a time on that route, is that right? Or is there 2 at a time? Or I guess there's a peak where there's 2.
There's a peak where there is 2, and then you also have school trips, which sometimes can have a 3rd bus, depending on the time. So Route 1 has variations to it, more so than the other routes in the system. So and that's because you have Brooks Secondary, you also have Tlalomin, you have trips up to Cranberry. So this plan was developed with the fleet that you have today, so there would be no additional capital in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elliott. Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Really appreciate this amazing report. It's a pretty exciting project. It always has been. It's heartening to know that Powell River is being watched all across Canada, but I think that some of us are aware of that because this does come up in discussions of sustainability, and there are more and more organizations that some of us here are linked into with that particular focus. So this is a particularly exciting initiative. And it's awesome it's been so successful so far. The question in my mind is with regard to BC Transit. I did carefully read their memo that was attached to our report, and it seems like, and I really feel that Mr. Ringma is a very good-hearted man who he's keen about this as well. He's keen about transit. I appreciated his passion, and I remember one time we kept him for about 2 3/4 hours beating him up here in council. When we, it's before this great stuff started happening. So, and he took that, and he was still happy and smiling at the end of it too, which was pretty amazing. So, can you hazard a guess or a feeling as far as where that's at? Because I get the feeling they would really like to to accelerate their extremely tedious process in reviewing and changing and get money going into this kind of project and see it happen across the province. Am I on the right track here, hopefully with my expectation? And can you speak to that? Thank you.
I think that's a very excellent question, Councillor, and I'm going to answer the question maybe in two ways. So I've worked with BC Transit in numerous capacities over the years, so everything from Safe Restart funding to a partner agency when I worked at TransLink to working in small communities here in BC. What's interesting is that BC Transit has 81 municipal transit systems, and that's 81 councils, that's 81 really needs that they need to serve across the province. And Aaron and I just worked for City of Cranbrook and saw a lot of the same parallels. Some of the challenges is that there's so many different transit needs across the province, and to get the attention, frankly, from BC Transit sometimes can be a bit challenging. I found the memo as part of your council package actually a very good news story, because there is now on the radar to advance some of this work, because sometimes this work does take years, and sometimes they're in the queue. BC Transit does have to work prioritized based off of the size of the system and what's going on in the community. So the fact that they want to work with you on the detailed scheduling of this, which was not in our scope, that's been great. We worked with them on other projects elsewhere. You know, the fact that BC Transit's doing the on-demand digital framework, that's something that's been asked for a long time by cities, and has been really pushed by some of the cities. I know our clients in Cranbrook are huge proponents of that. We still haven't heard a timeline from them. It is something that their CEO has said through, you know, their annual general meeting and their corporate priorities that they want to do. But there is that challenge. You are ahead of the gate because you're able to really leverage those federal funds. And to have that continuity of service, I think you need to have more timely conversation with BC Transit, and the fact that they want to help you with the consultation and have that process. This work helped push that along, because sometimes it takes a very, very long time to get these things moving. And like I said, they have 81 systems. It's very unique in Canada. That arrangement doesn't exist anywhere else.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sluthcott. Next on the speaking order, we have Councillor Doubt, followed by CAO Brewer. Did I see your hand up?
Yeah, if I could, I'll just quickly add.
Go right ahead.
The memo was quite positive from BC Transit, so I just want to highlight that they're willing to kind of work with us to shorten the time frame to review possible alignment and integration options. So hence the direction reflects the recommendation for direction to work with BC Transit on the service discussion document referenced in their memo.
So could you just flesh that out a little bit more for council, the timelines involved there?
Their process is generally quite a bit longer for doing a future transit action plan. Their recommendation in the memo is that the city work with BC Transit on a service discussion document that would accelerate some of the recommendations. They like the recommendations that were done in the report as well.
Thank you. Councillor Doubt?
Okay.
You're next.
I just actually have some comments. I think we've heard from all the staff people we're going to hear from so far, and I wanted to hear. It's a very thorough report. It goes into a lot of detail on various different things. What I take from it is that we've got the recommendations that are going to go to council, I guess, to make the recommendations. The first one is that we get into a discussion on a new planning document with BC Transit that I understand could take something like 2 years to get to, that could end up with combining the Route 1 and 2 and abandoning Route 3 and having that taken over by on-demand service. That's going to take over a period of time, and it's one of those things that might be out there. The other one is that we spend another $78,000 this year on the Zunga bus, and I think $188,000 next year in 2023. I think those are things that are going to go to council. I just want to talk a little bit about the whole Zunga bus experience to begin with. We started with a Zunga bus trial that was going to go, I think, for 6 months and provide service around the city for on-demand transit. We added additional money later on to extend the period of that trial to the end of the year, 2021. and to add an additional Zunga bus, which hopefully was going to provide service to Wildwood, where I live. That didn't happen. I see in the report that the study is saying that that's actually impractical to use even 2 buses to provide service to the whole community, and this report recommends that it be provided to the Westview area only and not to Townsite and not to Wildwood, and I see that developing. So we've got additional costs that are going to happen this year and next year in 2023 to do that. I have some concerns about the extension of 1 and 2 to be one single route. One of the good things about that, I was pretty excited to see, is actually I could use public transit to get from my house to town for a city council meeting, which I can't do right now because of the bus connections and the time, and I can't do on the Zunga bus. And it's not just me I'm concerned about, because there's lots of other people that would live in Wildwood and in between there too. And that's coming along. I see the proposed extension, which is a future possibility, or the proposed combination is a future possibility that might come after transit has studied it for a couple of years and at extra cost to the city. But it's also a slightly reduced route. There's a 400-meter walking distance that people would have to walk to get the bus. There's a number of parts in the neighborhood, some in Wildwood, some in Cranberry, and it looks like some in the main Westview area of the town that wouldn't have a bus service that do now. One of the things that pops up in my mind is that there are people in Wildwood and Westview and other areas of town that have been spending some time and serious amounts of money and are planning to, over the next couple of years, installing new bus shelters on the routes that exist. And I think we need to think about that if we're getting into a study with BC Transit about where these brand new bus shelters are going and whether or not they would be on that extended route or whether they wouldn't be. A couple of things. We've had since the beginning a hope, this is the beginning of the Zunga bus trial, that we would have BC Transit participating in the cost of the trial. It doesn't look to me that that's part of this proposal. The city would still be paying the entire cost of the trial, perhaps with a partner in the on-demand business, but we're not getting a contribution from BC Transit for the cost of the trial itself. So those are just my comments, and we'll see where it goes. But hopefully it'll provide improved service to at least some parts of the community.
Thank you for those clarifications, Councillor Dowd. And Councillor Leishman?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you to Aaron and our staff for all the work on this incredible report. Very thorough and a lot of amazing, really good points and good information. Yeah, the business model really spells it out, and the improvement to our service would just be incredible. The 1-year pilot, as we know, has been extended for the Zunga bus so far, and I think the whole point of working with BC Transit on a service discussion document would be to partner with BC Transit on bringing the on-demand into our service. So I think at this meeting we can probably direct staff, can we not? Recommendation number 1. So I'm going to move that staff be directed to work with BC Transit on a service discussion document to explore improved alignment and integration options between Zunga bus service and BC Transit conventional service, and implementing the Powell River Transit analysis and recommendations attached as Appendix A.
Moved by Councillor Leishman, seconded by Councillor Southcott. Comments? Hearing none. Before we got that, I've got a couple of comments and questions that I need to ask. So, thank you very much for your report. And at the outset of your report, you alluded to one comment that caught my attention, and that was you were surprised or generally happy to see that in all of your research and whatnot, Powell River is one of the few jurisdictions that was actually paying for busing. Did I get that right? That caught your team and made it kind of unique, Powell River, in terms of what we're doing here?
So the comment I made is about Powell River being the first in BC in doing this type of on-demand pilot, and also part of the federal government to do that. So that's the comment.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I was just wondering, I didn't catch it all. So the other question that I have is in the chart that you presented on ridership per day. Now, when I took a detailed look, which wasn't up on the screen very long, that I'm kind of curious because right now I don't know the answer to my question in terms of that slide and what it refers to. But when I count the heads ridership, no, not that one, that was the next one. I counted up the ridership per day, came to about 25 heads. Yeah, this one, per ridership per hour. So am I reading this correctly to say that we're on average getting about 25 heads on our bus on that schedule from 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. each day? Is that what this slide is telling me?
So this is an average slide per day, so you're getting about 3 to 6 per hour. So if you would be looking at about 25 per day.
So did we actually work out the cost per head per day?
I have not calculated that, and we can come back and give you that cost if you're looking for that, Chair Palm.
So this is just for the Zunga bus, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, it will be an interesting discussion going forward because I know that council was fairly split on the determination to bring a second Zunga bus forward to this community at additional cost, and I'm very disappointed to see that's not in service. It will be interesting, our future discussions when this goes to council. So thank you very much for being here. Seeing no further questions, we very much appreciate your presentation.
You have a motion on the floor, Chair.
Oh yes, we do have a motion. So, Corporate Officer, could you just reread the motion?
Certainly, Chair. It's item number 1, recommendation 1 in the staff report, that staff be directed to work with BC Transit on a service discussion document to explore improved alignment and integration options between Zunga bus service and BC Transit conventional service, and implementing the Powell River Transit analysis recommendations attached as Appendix A. So it's only the first recommendation that's on the floor, Chair.
So that refers to number 1 only, correct?
Number 1 recommendation in the staff report, yes.
Councilor Dowd.
Just have a question for staff, and I don't think that approving this motion would approve the costs that are associated with implementing that plan.
Sorry, Chair, are you referring to the second and third recommendations?
No, the
Something
first
different?
recommendation is a study of BC Transit, which has got a $51,000 cost, I think, for one route change and a $251,000 cost for other changes.
Through the chair, there's no cost associated with the first recommendation. That's
my question. I wanted to ensure that there's no cost, and if there are costs, that would come up later with an approval for changes in the price.
Thank you for that clarification, Councilor Dowd and CAO Brewer. Much appreciated. Seeing no further questions, no hands in the air, all in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Chair?
Yes, Councilor Leishman.
So for items 2 and 3, can we move those to council?
Yep.
Sure.
Chair, there's a couple options here. One, you can move it to council as is. Another option is if you gave direction today, then staff would be bringing back the financial plan with those in it, and that would be council's decision at that time. So you need to amend the existing one for the 75,000 to switch, and the new 5-year plan for 2023 onward, that one would come back as the financial plan bylaw. That'd be another option that you could consider.
Oh, yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're alluding to here. Could you just flesh this out a little bit further?
what the corporate officer is referring to is if direction was given to include these in the financial plan, they could be included in the financial plan, would come back to council for decision, or you could send both of these to council for decision to be included in the financial plan subsequent.
What is council's wish?
So, well, I would like to see them go to council for approval.
Any other further comments? Yes, Councillor Leishman?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that if we're to direct staff here, then it would go into the financial plan and then come to council. So it's going to go to council either way, but this just gets staff working on it to bring it to council.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands. Oh, Mayor Formosa, you have your hand up now, and then followed by Councillor Elliott.
So what I think I'm hearing is we're looking for, I heard three numbers, 51,000 second issue, 200K third issue, 75,000 for what? Switch? What? Can somebody explain?
Recommendation 2, it's in the report.
I'd like somebody to explain what it says in the report about 75,000. Thanks.
Chair, do you want me to read it? The direction is that staff directed to include 75,000 in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan from the COVID-19 Safe Restart Reserve to maintain the existing Zunga bus service with one bus in Westview area through 2022. So that's what number 2 is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. So I'm okay with it coming back to be approved through our budget process that we do with our 5-year plan. The initial getting staff working with BC Transit would presumably come back with whatever they managed to work out with BC Transit, and then we look at the budget from that point forward. I think bringing the budget items in before the discussions, you might end up having to bring them back again different. So I just think it would be redundant.
And thank you, Councillor Elliott. Corporate Officer.
What I think I suggest, Chair, is to perhaps refer this to the Finance Committee meeting. So then at the Finance Committee meeting, we'll be having the 5-year financial plan for discussion. This item obviously is integrated with that. So I suggest that this appear at the next Finance Committee, and you'll be more informed about what to do with the actual financial plan, which then would go to council.
So instead of this going forward to council in 2 weeks, it would then come to financial plan in two weeks.
Sorry.
Items 2 and 3?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I'd like to see.
Councillor Dowd.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of questions asked. I want to make sure the council understands what we've just been doing. And there's 3 recommendations in the report. The first one was a recommendation to direct staff to work with BC Transit on a surface discussion document, and we approved that, and I think staff will do that. There's no other step to do until BC Transit comes back. Recommendation number 2 is to include $75,000 in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan for the Zunga bus. And recommendation number 3 is to include $188,500 in the 2023 budget. So those are the things we're doing. Corporate officer would like us to deal with that at the Finance Committee, number 2 and number 3. I'm quite happy with that.
Me too.
Me too.
Hey, would somebody like to make that motion that this goes to the Finance Committee?
Unanimous consent.
Yeah.
Do we have to defeat the first one?
No.
No, we've already passed the first one, Chair. The first one.
Yes, that's right. We passed the one that is going to have the BC Transit involved. And the other 2 are now scheduled to come to the Finance Committee meeting in 2 weeks.
Unanimous consent.
By unanimous consent.
With unanimous consent.
I agree.
Correct? Everybody happy?
Yay!
Okay, very good.